Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the One Stump Short podcast, the first episode of 2017, no less. My guest on this episode is one half of the Freelance Cricket Club podcast. He's also a writer for The Guardian, ESPN Cricket Info, All Out Cricket, and many other outlets. Please welcome to the show Will Macpherson. Hi, Will. How are you?
Hi, Rob. Great to be here. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for joining me. A couple of weeks into the new county season now. I would say a couple of games in, but the quirk of the schedule means that some teams have played 2 games and some have only played 1 during the opening fortnight. But I'll start with Division 1. Who's impressed you so far in the top tier through these first couple of weeks, Will?
Well, I think what we're looking at is, it's been said quite a lot, but I genuinely believe this is the most competitive Div 1 for Yonks. Probably actually since the 2 divisional split at the turn of the century, because they slimmed it down to 8 teams, which some like and some don't. I'm pretty ambivalent, to be honest. I think it's probably actually good for Division 1 and bad news for Division 2 because it's been devalued a bit and it's a bit of a jumble sale down there. But Div 1, 25% of the division are going down. I said before the season started, I thought Warwickshire were going to be one of them, and I'm feeling quite smug about that prediction because they have been abysmal, nothing short of in the first 2 games. But there's still no guarantees. You'd think that Ian Bell or Jonathan Trott are going to win them a game at some stage, and Jonathan Trott did his level best to save one against Surrey in the first week, so they're not a complete basket case. And then but I still think it will be them +1, and who that +1 is going to be is anyone's guess really, because the teams that looked weaker, the promoted team Essex have beaten Somerset away. They thrashed Somerset away. And they've dug in to save a draw against Lancashire, who were also one of the weaker-looking teams, but who have pulled off 2 pretty strong draws away from home at Chelmsford and the Oval. And then Hampshire, who are the team who, by any cricketing merit, should not be in the division at all. But they've recruited cannily, whether you think the recruitment is morally or sort of the right way to do recruitment. Yeah. When you have a really strong set of young English players is another question, but you can't argue with the legality of all of the all of their signings and also the pure quality of them. I was down at the Aegeus last week to watch them play Middlesex, who they were on top of Middlesex for pretty much the whole game, really. Apart from the first day, they just look a very complete side. So Abbott is an absolutely phenomenal opening bowler, particularly to left-handers at this time of year. I think he's got 2 fifers already. He's also got a 50 as a night watchman. He's a completely game-changing signing, and he's around.
He's legit. He's a legit signing, as they say, and
he's so good.
Yeah, he was arguably. I know, and I agree with the point you made. Morally, it's possibly questionable, especially when you look at Tom Alsop and Mason Crane missing out, 2 of the hottest young properties in English cricket. But as you said, within the rules that we currently play by, they haven't broken any.
They're not the only county doing it.
No.
I wrote last week that they're sort of short on public goodwill, and they are, because they were the beneficiaries of the Durham situation. And I actually do think it was right that they stayed up and not Kent going up. I do think that's correct on the basis that this time last year, we set out knowing that 2 teams would be going down from Division 1 and 1 would be going up from Division 2. And then I think to then just throw that away because a 3rd team were deemed unfit, I think that's wrong. I think you've got to keep it exactly as planned. As much as I would have liked Kent to go up, I like Kent a lot. Hampshire were right to stay up, and then obviously and then Rod Brandsgrove made some quite crass comments in the aftermath of the Durham situation. It made the club sound a bit smug, I think, when really they had nothing to be smug about at all. They just got very lucky.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And actually, and then obviously the manner of their recruitment has put some noses out of joint in the rest of the country as well. But what the upshot of it is that they are a Division One team. They have an unbelievably strong squad, as you mentioned there. I mean, there's a couple of young lads missing out, but there's also, I think, Reece Topley. I think they're going to name the squad for tomorrow. They're facing Yorkshire tomorrow. I think Reece Topley is going to be in the squad for the first time since the first game of last year. He still hasn't bowled a ball for them because he got injured batting. Yeah. I remember I was there. He made his highest first class score of 15 and got hit on the hand, and then a series of injuries from there. As meant he hasn't bowled a ball for Hampshire yet. But he's going to come back into the squad. Fidel Edwards is injured, so he'll just come in for him. Rousseau, I think, will probably miss out because he's got a very badly hurt hand, but he still managed to make 99 against Middlesex. But and then so you've got those two missing out. George Bailey hasn't arrived yet. He's going to captain them. They're not facing any obvious England call-ups. Like Liam Dawson might go for a bit with the white ball squads, but there's James Vince. I don't think we'll get any call-ups this summer. So they're just a really well. Suddenly, all of a sudden, from nowhere, having looked abysmal for much of last year, they're suddenly a really well put together squad. And you mentioned Crane and Allsop. That, I think, is a problem that they can't get him aside. I do think that's an issue. Like if two of the hottest, as you said, hottest young piece of talent can't get in the county 11, then yeah, something's not quite right there. But Allsop's being kept out by, take your pick between Jimmy Adams, Riley Rousseau, or Sean Irvine, really. So you can look at it in many different ways. And then Crane, I've spoken to Crane about it, and he wasn't expecting. They played at Headingley first, and he said, "Well, you're not going to play two spinners on the 7th of April at Headingley."
Yeah,
and Dawson is a containing spinner who gets him aside on the state of his
batting as well.
So why wouldn't you play 4 frontline seamers alongside that? And I do understand that. I also think...
Oh, yeah, that's fair, absolutely.
I also think that you look across the rest of the country at the moment and everyone else is picking, like, lots of teams are picking more than one spinning option. So, yeah, I mean, it's very tricky. It would be nice if they were able to find a spot for Crane and Allsop in their team tomorrow. And I wouldn't actually be surprised if they do, because it might be quite flat again at the Ageas. So Crane might just be that game-changing option late in the game against Yorkshire. But you just never know. Hopefully, that's. But to get I've gone on a very long-winded answer of your question. And your question was, who's impressed you in Division 1 so far? And the answer is Hampshire.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean that's completely justifiable for the reasons you've just outlined as well. Because I think, kind of as you alluded to, before the season began, based largely on what happened last year, a lot of people would have probably put them in the bottom 3 or 4, that sort of area of the table. And obviously, right now they're second behind Surrey, who've also had a fantastic start to the year. I mean, they've come out the gate flying. And the thing that, to loop back slightly to Warwickshire, the thing that concerns me, they've played 2 games and only picked up 3 points.
Yeah.
The next 2 teams above them are Somerset and Middlesex, who've both only played 1. There could quickly be a bit of a gap there if Warwickshire don't do anything against Surrey Edgbaston. With 2 teams going down, with 2 less games this year as well to play, it's a difficult spot to be in. I mean, they've had 3 scores out of 4 less than 180 as well, which is a serious concern to a team that you would say probably their batting on paper is marginally better than their bowling. You know, they've really struggled to do anything in either form right now.
I think it's kind of obvious. It's kind of an obvious point, but there's just, I think in that Warwickshire team there are just too many. There's so much pedigree there and so much quality, but there are just too many miles in the legs. So I think they picked the same 11 in both the first 2 games, and I think that's right. But certainly the one they had at Surrey, 8 of the 11 were over 30. I think Mellor, Sam Hain, and Ollie Hannon Dolby are not 30. and all of the other players are over 30. And when we're talking about Ricky Clark, Tim Ambrose, Ian Bell, Jonathan Trott, they're not even
well
wrong
over
side of
30.
30. They're wrong side of 35. They're just an old team, but there's not much hope. Like, it could be counted as homegrown there. I mean, obviously Bell, Hayne, it actually counts as coming through their system, but there's very little else. A lot of it is imported from elsewhere. There's something not quite right there. What I don't quite understand is how they've let themselves, and I know they've had a change of management, and I know it's been a little bit up in the air, but how they've let themselves come into this season without a single opening batsman of quality.
Yeah.
You need two of them, and they haven't got one.
And they've let one go, arguably, as well.
They let Chopra go, but also there's been what I find odd on that front is there's been a bit of movement in that position. So Stoneman joined Surrey. Like, how have they let Stoneman go there when really they needed him much more than Surrey did? And they've got exactly the same. Well, they're maybe not quite as powerful, but they could have offered him the same money that Surrey have, and it is a lot of money that Surrey have given Stoneman and Borthwick. But they could have signed one of them at least, and yet somehow here they are with Alex Mellor, who's a wicket-keeper batsman, and William Porterfield, who hasn't actually been in their best championship side in recent years. He's been the guy who's sort of come in. He's played when Bell and Trott used to play for England, and now he's their first choice, and he's going to go off and play for Ireland all summer. It's just I look at it and I just think, how have you let the squad get into this state? You sort of hear about them planning a raid on Worcester, maybe, and going shopping there, a bit like Surrey did at Durham. And someone like Joe Clark he's gonna have
significant
10
offers
trying to sign him at some stage. He's that good, and he keeps as well, and he wants to keep, and he's not keeping at the moment. But Warwickshire would be right at the front of that queue. But I don't, honestly, in the short term, they're not. Giles has said they're not going to look to loan players, which I think is admirable. And I actually do think Giles is the right bloke to turn things around, and Jim Troughton's looks like a good young coach as well. So I don't, in the short term, I don't quite know what they should do. I've been thinking about it. I wonder if they should just, Sam Haynes he's had a horrible start to the season, but he is a really good player, and he's still only 21. I wondered if they've got Surrey at home this week. I wondered if they should just, and this is sort of hunch rather than any sort of factual good idea, but whether he should just give him a run opening the batting, because it's not working at 5. But I just, just to change something up, it's obviously not working as it is.
No, absolutely.
So have a look at that, possibly.
Let's just have a little look at the third place team, Yorkshire, because we've touched on Surrey slightly, who've probably been powered by their batting, as we alluded to, and obviously they ran into Warwickshire as well, who we've just talked about their difficulties, to be polite. But Yorkshire are sort of sitting just behind those top two on 28 points right now. A first season without Jason Gillespie, and we did have a question coming from Matt Thompson asking how we thought they could perform without Jason Gillespie in charge, but so far, so good it seems.
Yeah, I mean, they lost that extraordinary game to Hampshire in week 1, didn't they? Hampshire chased down 300 odd, and sometimes you just have to look at that and go, yeah, fair
enough.
And the way Hampshire did it was everyone chipped in. It was almost the perfect chase, really. No one, I wasn't there, but no one had to do it all on their own. It wasn't a single, they put on 90 odd for the first wicket, and then Vince got a few, Dawson got a few, Rousseau got a few. It was a very well managed chase. I think Yorkshire probably just have to take that one on the chin a little bit. They are extraordinary, aren't they? Ben Code has come in and he's got 18 wickets in 2 games. He's one of those names who you've sort of seen in Yorkshire second teams and playing a game here and there over the last couple of years, and he hasn't really done anything. And then it turns out he's 23 or 24 and he's absolutely ready to go. And he's just a tailor-made to come straight into the side and replace all the big guns who are missing. And he's done brilliantly. It's they're an extraordinary club in that regard, and I mean I know they look like they're ready to walk into the post Gillespie world and be absolutely fine. I mean I looked at them going into the season. I did wonder just whether I think last year they were on the decline. Last year, to be honest, I think there was nothing as formidable about them last year as there was the year before or the year before that. But if they could retain the level they were at last year, I think that would be a huge achievement. I mean, Gale is a first-time coach. Balance is a first-time captain. As we know, they get hit hard by call-ups. And also there's another, a bit like Warwickshire, but nowhere near as extreme. There's just another mile in all the legs.
Yeah.
Particularly of the bowlers. You look at Brooks and Sidebottom. They're not. I mean, certainly Sidebottom's not young, and Brooks isn't young either. Brezzo is a genius, but is not the youngest bloke on earth. You could see why they might decline a little bit. I actually thought, I do think, and I think they remain as likely to be relegated as to win the title this year. I'd say that.
Ooh.
But they have made, I think they bounced back brilliantly from that Hampshire defeat to beat Warwickshire. So and they're at the Aegeus tomorrow, so they do have another chance to get a win. They've got Root and Bairstow there tomorrow, and that is huge. I mean,
yeah, massive.
They've got extraordinary strength and depth, and there's so much to admire about Yorkshire, really. The way they constantly regenerate. And actually, they've got so many of these funny little unsung heroes, I find. You know, everyone's been talking about, Bairstow's not around. But Andrew Hodd, he's not one of the great players, but he just continues to do a really unfussy, quiet job in Bairstow's absence. Like, it's really admirable. And Patterson's another one like that. They just get the job done.
I think Hodd reminds me a little bit of John Simpson at Middlesex, a similar thing where they chip in with the bat I think Simpson maybe got more plaudits now, or certainly has done over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, and he did. But they just chipped in with important runs. They were unfussy behind the stumps.
Yeah, I mean, Simpson's become an extraordinary cricketer. The main thing that sets Simpson apart is his nerve in these tight chases, or when the going gets tough for Middlesex, he comes in at number 6 and he's extraordinary. He's, if you ask Middlesex fans, they find it perplexing and hilarious that he doesn't even been in the frame for any international recognition.
So move on to Division 2, which has also got a bit of a log jam at the top. Nottinghamshire 44 points. Northants also 44 points after that incredible game against Derby. And Kent 43 points just behind. Should also point out that Worcestershire played one game and got maximum points from that.
They got 4 points, didn't they?
Yeah, so... And I kind of suspect, colours to the mast, I'm a Nottinghamshire fan, so I'd hoped they would be there or thereabouts this year. So far, so good on that front. I suspected Worcestershire and Kent would be there again based on what they did last year, the squads they've got. I think Will Gidman's a nice pickup for Kent, certainly. And it seems to be playing out that way thus far.
Yeah, I thought, Sussex have only played one game and they got trounced by Kent in the end after they stuck with them for 2.5 days, it seems, and then got absolutely mullered in the last day and a half. They are going to Trent Bridge this week, so that might be tough as well. They look like they've got a good side, Sussex, but I think one of the problems with Division 2 this year, and I referenced it at the start, is that it all sort of depends on the fixtures computer a little bit, because it's such an inelegant setup whereby not everyone is playing everyone twice. You do have, just looking at it randomly, if you play Leicestershire, Glamorgan, Derbyshire and, say, for argument's sake, Gloucestershire twice, you're in quite a nice position.
Yeah.
Because, you can you'd fancy yourself to pick up wins in most of those games, weather permitting, and then you're in a really good position. I think Sussex, I think this again off the top of my head, and I've read this and I don't quite have it written down to back me up, but I think they are the ones of the good-looking sides who got the worst end of the stick with the fixtures computer. And what they're going to find is if they go and lose at Trent Bridge this week, and there's no shame in that, there's going to be a lot of teams who are blasted away by an attack which includes Pattinson, Broad and Ball. I think all of them are available for this game, which is actually a bit scary.
Yeah.
and Luke Fletcher's bowling like a god as well. If they, if say they get blown away by them, they've then lost 2 games in the first 2 weeks, and it's very difficult to come all the way back from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they might find themselves in a tough spot. Notts are a bit of a funny one because their batting hasn't looked very good. They've been bailed out in both games by, well, the first game it was Pattinson and Broad, wasn't it? And then in the second game it was Pattinson and Fletcher.
Yeah.
They've been bailed out by them, but then they still won both games by 10 wickets and 9 wickets. So they look a serious side who are going to, I think the presence of Pattinson is a complete game changer for them. Siddle would have been a nice signing. He's such a good cricketer, but compare that to the scary skills of Pattinson and what he can do. I mean, Siddle is never going to blast a team out in a session, is he?
No.
Whereas
no.
Pattinson, and I spoke to a Notts player the other day, who said to me, I just want to stay in the side so I can keep standing in the slip cordon because it's so funny watching people bat against him. Just because he's that scary. Same player also said he's retiring from batting in the net.
For the same reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, they look a very strong side. I like Kent as well. I thought before the season started that it would be Kent just missing out to Sussex for second place, and Kent, frustrated again another year in Div 2. But actually, the way they've started and the couple of signings they've made since I made that prediction make them a real handful. So James Harris is such a good signing.
Yeah,
on loan. I don't know how long he'll be around, but Middlesex got so much bowling depth.
I think he'll be there all year because of that reason. I think
in theory, yeah. I mean, when Steve Finn will be with England at some stage, surely Murtagh will be with Ireland.
Maybe.
Harris is at Middlesex. They got the first choice trio are Murtagh, Roland Jones, and Finn. And then Tom Helm is the next one in after them. And then it's a scrap between, I think Harris would be next after that. But then they've also got James Fuller, who's an England Lion. And they've also got Harry Podmore, who's really, really promising. So they're spoiled for choice. It wouldn't surprise me if he's around for Kent for a while. He had a little injury last week. They're playing Derbyshire at Canterbury this week. Yeah. So you really strongly fancy them to win that. They signed Parnell. They've basically got, what they've got is about 5 high-quality bowling all-rounders.
Yeah. Will Gidman bowled 1 over against Gloucestershire and took 1 wicket, a wicket maiden, and that was all they needed him for.
I assume Harris will be back in the side this week, but there's actually a possibility that he might come into the side for Gidman because they've got so much. Like, why wouldn't you give it? I mean, Harris can really bat. Harris could bat 7. Yeah. He's a sort of 7.5 in Division 1, I'd say. So he's definitely a 7 in Div 2. Stevens could definitely move up a place. So, but they've got all these bowlers. They've got Stevens, Harris, Parnell, Coles, Gidman, Clayton, Treadwell. I mean, maybe it's Treaders who misses out. I don't know. Do you? We probably want a spinner down there, don't you? But they've got lovely depth. They look a really good sign. At some stage, hopefully they'll get Billings for a couple of championship games, which he's a player who changes the look of their batting again.
Yeah, I mean, their batting's pretty good as well. They're top 4.
Yeah, the batting's really good.
They've got Bell Drummond. Weatherly opened with Bell Drummond. Joe Denley, who's starting to find his feet a bit more as time passes at Canterbury, and then Sam Northeast, who blasted that massive 100.
Yeah, I mean, Northeast is such an interesting one because he looks ripe for it, doesn't it? Yeah. He's made. When he gets 100, I think 160 he's made 600 since the start of last year, and 160 is the smallest of them. Like when he's on, he's really, really on. I'm pretty sure he's in the England frame, but I don't think he's quite as far up the queue as some people would maybe like him to be.
Yeah, I think. I mean, that's kind of the thing. I mean, Dixon opened against Sussex, and Weatherly was against Gloucestershire in the first game. Right. That's the only kind of position where you kind of like, well, they haven't really got a fixed second opener. But if your top 4 is, as we've just said, and then you've got, they had Gidman coming in at 5, you could have Stevens batted 6 against Sussex, but again, as you said, could be Harris. I think it was against Gloucestershire. It's just, I mean, before the season began, I had partly, I'll admit there is partly personal bias, but I had Notts down as one of the two to come up, and I thought Worcestershire would be the other one. But the way Kent have started the year, so the season they had last year, maybe the disappointment is also a motivator for teams sometimes. But as you mentioned, one of the key things, I had a quick look just for example's sake, more as part of this conversation at Notts' schedule this year, and they play Kent once, Worcestershire once, Durham once, so that's done. And the other team they only play a single time is Glamorgan. Now,
that's a shame for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I feel like this goes both ways, though, because you can kind of have a feast against the Glamorgans, Leicestershires, Derbyshires of the world, the teams who are struggling to get it going. But equally, if you, let's just say, for instance, Notts have real trouble with Worcestershire, they've only got to play them once. So that's one game they go, okay, look, they dicked us, but it's done now. Let's put it behind us. We haven't got to play them again. We haven't got to worry about that. We haven't got to worry about some sort of promotion decider between the two teams. What's done is done. And that's kind of how almost you look at the Durham game, because that could have been a really difficult game for Notts. And Durham are going to be, despite the points disadvantage, which we can touch on maybe in a second, they're still going to be a heck of a side in that division. Guys like Rushworth and Onions alone mean they're going to be competitive in a lot of games, and depending on how much Jennings plays and what guys like Collingwood do this year, they're going to be a handful. They're probably going to have a say in that Division 2 race, just because they are such a good team. But it kind of, that weird dynamic where you only play some teams once, I feel like it swings both ways because of who you can. I mean, as you said, you might end up in a situation where you get to play Glamorgan twice while Glamorgan are playing as badly as they are at present, and you get a run feast and some confidence. But equally, it can go the other way, and you say, well, actually, I'm quite glad we've avoided having to play this team twice this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Div 2 is a division of two halves this year. I mean, some of the teams. I after week 1, I was in a bit of a bad mood with Division 2 because I felt that some of the teams had just mailed it in, basically, just sort of rolled over very meekly. And I say that as someone who wasn't at any of the games, but Gloucestershire.
I think that's been the criticism for a couple of years, though, hasn't it? That
but normally you see that in sort of August when some of the teams have nothing to play for, not in April when.
True, no, that's fair.
In theory, it's open season. But, Gloucester, they were something like 30-7, weren't they, against Kent? Glamorgan got rolled inside 2 days by Northants. It's not like they got rolled in 2 days by Yorkshire. It was Northants who did it to them. And then Leicestershire got pantsed by Notts. I mean, there's actually increasingly clear that there's no shame in that.
But they got pantsed by Gloucestershire as well then. So
yeah, well, then they got pantsed by one of the teams who got pantsed the week before. So, I mean, I do think there's going to be, there are sort of 5 good teams and 5 are going to be scrapping around the bottom, or maybe 6 and 4. But I think that period where teams have got nothing to play for is going to be quite long this year, which is a shame. It makes Division 2, what we could find is Division 2 is a bit of a non-event quite quickly. I hope that's not the case, but that may just happen.
Yeah, and the way the schedule's lined up, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, Notts play Sussex this weekend, call it, coming up, and then there's no more Championship cricket for them until May 19th. And then we've obviously got the blocks of the 2020 and the One Day Cup, and it's just all this weird system where, as you said, if Notts continue this current form, they'll certainly hope to, because Pattinson's been called up to the Australian Champions Trophy team, so they'll be hoping to make the most of having Broad and Ball around and having Pattinson around. And by the time those guys maybe have gone back to international duty, let's bracket it that way, then they bring in Luke Wood, who is a very capable bowler. Maybe they bring in Ben Hutton. Will get. I mean, it's maybe a last chance to Luke Hutton. He did not have a good year last year, but the year before he did bowl quite well and make strides. So, it's a year that he could.
Hutton's a good player as well.
He is a good player. He just had a bad year.
He fields in the slips and he bats 8 quite well, doesn't he? So I mean, he's in Division 2. If you had an attack of Gurney, Fletcher, Hutton, and Wood with Samit nipping in with his left armers, then you've actually got quite. I think that's more than enough. It's just a lovely luxury to have for the next. If we maybe say next couple of games, if they've got Pattinson, Ball, Broad, and probably Fletcher ahead of Gurney at the moment, I reckon, just based on the start of the season. If you've got that, then just take advantage of it. Get as many points as you can. I mean, I'd be surprised if not to lose a game this year, but that might be the kiss of death. It's in the second half of games so far, really, isn't it? Where they've shown they look a little bit better than other teams of the division. Even the way they pretty clinically chased. I know it's only 110 or whatever they were chasing, but a lot of teams in that division would find themselves 5 down chasing that.
Yeah. Against a team like Durham as well, who as we said, with Rushworth
proper
and that
attack,
running in.
Markwood, Rushworth, Onions, really good attack. Paul Coughlin's pretty good as well. You could easily have found that they were in a bit of trouble there, but they just knuckled down and got on with it.
I mean, is that the to sound maybe slightly condescending, is that the Division 1 in Notts, where, and this kind of loops back to what we just said a few moments ago about the differences between Division 1 and 2, and I've heard this reference before where people say that Division 1 is a 4-day game, if it goes that long, is a 4-day game, whereas Division 2 is hard cricket for probably 2 days, and then it starts to peter out, and Notts have come in, and all of a sudden they're like, this is a 4-day game, lads. They just go. I mean, that's maybe unfair on Durham, who they just played, because obviously Durham were big players in Division 1 for a long time. But it's kind of that attitude that they've brought with them, especially because they've basically retained the entire Nottinghamshire team that got relegated.
Yeah, I think also the change in backroom setup was probably necessary.
Yes.
As the year changed. I mean, even if you just look at them, Peter Moores is a man who gets a lot of bad press. Well, gets a lot of bad. I don't think the English cricketing public give him the credit that he maybe deserves.
I'd agree with that.
But he's seen as a bit of a joke figure, which he really, really shouldn't be. But you can see already the fingerprints of him all over this Nott squad. So Fletcher's lost 3 stone over winter. Brendan Taylor's lost 10 kilos. They're working much harder, but he also, one of his things is that when you're working, it's like he tries to treat it like they've got a normal job. Yeah. So it's like when you're working, you're going to work really hard, but when you're not working,
have fun.
Just don't talk about cricket. Don't do any cricket now. You're off, chill. And I think he's very good at that, of getting their minds in focus. So I think maybe Mick Newell, and he'd probably admit this, I think maybe he'd let Standard slip a little bit. They were definitely the worst in terms of fitness. They were the worst in Div 1 last year. Just looking around, just from a position in the stands where you can tell from where you sat who's fit and who's not. And they were definitely right down the bottom in Div 1 last year. So, I mean, and he's made some interesting changes to the batting order. They've got he's put Samit at 3. Obviously, Mulaney's got to come back into the side. He'll come back in for either.
I suspect Wood. I suspect he'll come at the top of the order. Not Wood. Sorry.
Smith.
Smith. Sorry. Yeah, Greg Smith.
Yeah, you think he'll come in for Smith, but Smith's probably had a better start to the season than Libby, so maybe it might be Libby, and then Brendan Taylor. Will he? Won't he? He'll probably come in for Wessels. I would think at some stage, or Lum. In the middle order, so that they're quite well placed. They've got good depth. I think I'd be very surprised if they don't come up. And like I said, I'd think they'll win the thing.
Yeah, we've got a question coming. We mentioned Durham a few minutes ago. A question from Patrick Smith. What are you lads expecting from Durham this year? Is the weight of the punishment going to hold them back for some time, and was it warranted? Well, I think I've probably nailed my colours to the mast on whether it was warranted a few times. I don't think the full extent of it was at all. But what do you think Durham can do this year in light of everything that's gone on, Will?
I think promotion is beyond them, unfortunately.
Yes, I'd agree with that, definitely.
I mean, they moved to minus 45 points after their game against Notts. So it might be. I mean, who have they got this weekend? They're away at Gloucestershire, so hopefully it'd be nice if they could get a win there. But it's what I would say about. I was convinced that. Well, not convinced, but what I thought would happen was. I thought relegation was the correct punishment, actually.
I didn't have an issue
for the situation. I couldn't really argue with it. It's so sad, but something had to happen. And the only victims are the players, really. I suppose the members as well, but it's not quite the same. And it just kind of that I couldn't see another way you could punish them. You either dock loads of points from them this year and they go down this year, or you just get it over and done with. But I thought the points deductions that went on top of relegation were excessive and unfair. And what I thought would happen was it all came out in about September, didn't it, or October? Yeah. I thought we would get to about Christmas or January or February, and then it would be announced that those punishments had been halved or waived or whatever. I thought that would happen, and it never did. So I think it's really unfair that they start minus 48.
Yeah. I think what the real kick
not least because minus 48 is 2 perfect wins.
Yeah.
There haven't been many of them. I mean, we mentioned Worcestershire had got one. I'm not sure
anyone
else.
They're the only ones so far, I think.
It's not like it's not like a 24-point win is a normal win. That's a perfect performance. So, and in a 14-game season, to get 2 of them would be a great effort anyway.
Yeah.
So I hoped that they would start on 0 points. They haven't, and it's a long road back. I mean, I think if they could finish in the middle of that division, if they could finish 5th, that would be a great effort.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree the 48 was excessive. I think maybe if it had been, probably as you said, half that to 24, it probably would have been enough to mean they're not going to come back up this year, because I think the top end of that division, as we've kind of just touched on, is probably too competitive to overcome a 1 perfect game disadvantage. I thought the deductions in the One Day Cup, and particularly the 2020 Blasts, were also... I mean, we're only talking about 2 points in the One Day Cup and 4 points in the Blast, but actually that matters quite a lot in those competitions.
I don't see the relevance of it. If you're relegating them from the Championship, I don't know why they should have punishments in those comps.
Yeah, well, I think the 2020, I guess, is... The punishment is probably ending their hopes, or possibly ending their hopes of reaching the finals day, and the financial benefit that could bring. And equally, I guess maybe even in the one-day competitions, if you're the sort of the marketing department at Durham, you can go, okay, well, we have to take the 4-day cricket on the chin, but if we want to go to potential sponsors, we can go, well, look, guys, we're really good at one-day cricket. So, get behind our 50-over games, get behind our 2020 Blast games. We're hoping to win this competition this year, or at least make the finals day, and all this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, if we're already starting 4 points down in the 2020 Blast, it's much harder for us to go, look, we're winning our group, we're going to make the Final Four, because you've got that massive hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I mean, in terms of the actual team that they've been left with, obviously Borthwick and Stoneman are probably in Division 2. That's in a 14-game Div 2 season. I'd imagine that's about 2,400 runs taken out of a team.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Jennings, I wondered whether Jennings might have been a bit of a one-season wonder, just a bloke in the form of his life. But I think all the evidence is that he's carrying it over, and it was great. It was so good to see him make runs against Notts last week. I was delighted with that, because it really made me hope that they had something to build the batting around for at least some of the season.
Yeah.
And the 2 overseas pickups are pretty reasonable. Stephen Cook and Tom Latham, given the budget that they, or lack of, that they no doubt had to get a couple of current international openers. I think it's good effort. Hopefully, I mean, Cook had a poor first game, but hopefully he can chime in this week. One thing I don't quite understand is they've got Graham Clark, who I covered their last game of last season, which turned out to be a really ironic game, because it was against Hampshire at the Ageas Bowl, and it relegated Hampshire and Durham, and it turned out to be a complete waste of 4 days of our life. But they had Graham Clark batting, who's Jordan Clark of Lancashire, who made a great ton last week. It's his brother, and he's made. He finished last season batting number 4, and now he can't get the side when they've lost all these players. So I don't quite understand how that works. But he is he's made 3 consecutive tons of the second team, so we might see him this week, you'd think. There's enough there to work with. There's a lot on young Jack Burnham's shoulders. He's batting number 3. I wonder if it might do everyone a favour if he batted number 4, I reckon, just to protect him a little bit. But, there's the bowling, as you said, there's plenty there. It's just a question of,
getting over that hump.
I hope, just getting into positive figures. I know it sounds so patronising, but getting into positive figures will be a huge thing for them.
Yeah.
But that could feasibly be 3 games away.
Yeah.
It's 45 points to make up. So say they have one good win, a decent draw, and then a scrappy defeat, and they might be about parity.
Yeah.
It's very tough.
I mean, their next 2 championship games, they've got Gloucester, as we mentioned, away this weekend. And then the next one, which is towards the end of May, obviously, as we alluded to with the one-day stuff, is Sussex away. So they're games which are not easy, but they're also winnable. And then after that, they've got Glamorgan away. So they've got a bit of a road swing in the championship. But there are 3 games there that, as you said, could very quickly be 3 wins. Or let's say they beat Gloucestershire and Glamorgan, which I think would be a fair bet, and then maybe draw or lose in Sussex, but you've got hopefully some bonus points. So that's probably got them into positive figures there with 2 wins and either a draw or a lose or a decent. I call it a decent loss. It's a funny term to use, but if there's potential there to do it, especially if Sussex, I think without Philander, who we didn't really touch on at all, but I think that's a potential loss for them for the next couple of weeks, and then depending on how he recovers, maybe longer. I mean, he's only here for a certain time anyway. So they've got quite good bowling strength anyway. Sussex with Jofra Archer's a hell of a player. That's fair.
David Visa's a good signing, and Steve McGoffin missed out with injury in the first game, but he ended up with 50 wickets last year again. He just keeps coming in, he keeps plugging away, even though he's pretty old now. But they're all right. They've got enough to work with as a side. But it's difficult. Like we said, I think Div 2 is going to be the challenge for Durham is getting themselves into the good half of Division 2 rather than the crap half, basically. Honestly, I think if they can do that, if they can be in the conversation, not necessarily even for promotion, but in the conversation and keeping games competitive to the end of the season, I think that would be a massive victory for them, and would place them reasonably well to come back again the following year when they start on 0 points. But the problem is it's a very vicious cycle, as Sussex are sort of finding. They went down in the worst possible year, 2015, because only one team went up in 2016.
And now they're stuck.
Essex were quality last year, so they didn't go up then. And they also had the Matthew Hobden disaster, and I think I wouldn't underestimate how much that took out of them last year as a force. But now they, like you say, they're in a vicious cycle where they are struggling to get out of Div 2. And next year, 2 teams are going to come down from Div 1 to, not assuming, but say Durham and Sussex don't go up this year, then they might be joined by, say, Warwickshire and Lancashire, or Warwickshire and Essex or someone, and they're 2 very good sides who will make, and 2 teams go up again. So it's a very vicious cycle for these teams who we've become accustomed to knowing in Division 1. Say, Sussex and Durham, who've won the title a couple of times in recent years and, been a quality side up there. For them to be down in Division 2, you get sort of stuck in the mire a little bit, and it's very difficult to get out.
Unfortunately, Will, we've run out of time for this episode. Thank you very much for joining me. Where's the best place for people to find you online?
Probably Twitter. Find me at Willis McP, or at Willis_McP, actually. I should probably know my own Twitter handle, shouldn't I? But yeah, find me there, at Willis_McP.
And can we expect to see the Freelance Cricket Club podcast back again this summer at some point?
We can. Vish and I are both lazy, and
Honest.
And when we're not being lazy, busy. So we think we have a guest lined up for the start of May, which is when we're next available. So we hopefully will get maybe it would maybe a lofty aim, but get 10 done in the summer or something like that. Once we're both back on the cricket beat, which we are now, it's much easier. But in the winter, when you're sort of, as you know, when you're sort of doing all sorts of other things and there's no cricket actually happening, it's quite difficult to get one done.
It is. Perfect. Thanks very much for your time today, Will.
Cheers, Rob. Thanks very much.